Uh, Shalom. How y'all doing? This is Obadiah. I'm back on the scene, and I'm back in effect. I want to give out Shalom Shabbat to everybody in Israel, the nation of Israel, in New Egypt, and abroad, to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Uh, I'm I'm resurrecting my YouTube channel for the simple fact that I've had a few brothers in the faith that have asked me to basically get back on YouTube and and share the wealth of knowledge that is coming out. We have a lot of people awakening. We're in the age of awakening in the beginning of 2000, really in the beginning of 2011, as my brother Melech Hebrew prophesied. That Israel and the bones of Ezekiel, the bones prophesied by Ezekiel in the valley of dry bones would be, awakening, and we are now getting water in those bones, and those bones are becoming sinew, and sinew is becoming meat. So we're in the age of awakening, and I feel that it's very prudent that a lot of clarity, a lot of things need to be clarified as far as so-called doctrine in the faith. Um, First of all, I would like to speak about what's been going on lately in the debate. A lot of people, the debates have raised the consciousness of a lot of people. Well, first of all, the debate coming out of New York have raised the consciousness of a lot of the conscious community and the intelligence community, and the so-called Black intelligence community. And not only that, it has what was I about to say? It has put Hebrew Israelites on the spot. Now, a lot of Hebrew Israelites will disagree with what I'm saying, but I mean, the truth is always disagreed with when you're living in the realm, and when you're living in the realm in a sea of lies. I will say this: I do believe that some of the debates have been fruitful. I do believe that uh, some Kemetic teachers did win the debate. I do believe that we can learn from the losses, from our losses. Now, I would like to highlight the word "our" because even though I do believe that, even though I do acknowledge, not believe, even though I do acknowledge that um, uh, some Kemetic teachers have actually come out victorious on the debate, it does not mean that all is lost. It just means that, you know, we need to learn and study more. And the reason that I acknowledge that some Kemetic teachers won the debate, and I know a lot of brothers will disagree with me, is that a lot of people, Israelite brothers, will disagree with me. Is that the Kemetic teachers kept the debate on a historical, factual perspective. The reason we lost the debate, or some of the debate, is that we didn't, one, attach historical accounts to the scriptures that we were edifying or sharing. And for two, the main reason is that we try to distance ourselves from Egypt. Now, let me say this before I get into Egypt. Three things. First thing, we have to acknowledge that the time we're living in today, right now I'm in South Carolina. I live in Houston, Texas. My heart is in New York. Okay, but my blood is Nigerian. I am from the Yoruba tribe, so I can clearly identify and testify that by blood, by faith, and by heritage, and by culture, that I am a Hebrew Israelite. Now, uh, for one, we're right now in what is considered, according to the book of Genesis, according to the prophecy of Abraham, and according to Deuteronomy, that we are in what is now called New Egypt. And the reason the United States is considered Egypt is because a lot of the Egyptian artifacts, such as when you look at the building of Washington, D.C., when you look at the obelisk in the, what do you call it? That part where Brother Martin Luther King gave his speech, and Farrakhan led the Million Man March. That obelisk, the obelisk is basically what looked like a it's basically a singular stone that looked like the shape of a pole. And the obelisk is in reference to our Lord's resurrection when his father was cut into pieces, or when he was cut into pieces, and his wife, it's a mythology, it's a myth, but his wife found pieces of his body across the Nile, put it back together, but could not find his penis. And the obelisk is the representation of the resurrection of our Lord. Now, we see that in Washington, D.C. We also see the statue of Abraham Lincoln, I believe, as a representation of one of the pharaohs in Egypt. There are a lot of Egyptian symbolism across the country, mainly in Washington, D.C., and that's why the United States is considered the New Egypt, because it was based on the civilization and structures of Egypt. Now, the reason that it was based on the civilization and structures of Egypt is because the Greeks pretty much copied their civilization based on what they saw in Egypt. And I will also say this, that Egypt is not the first civilization. Stop it. Okay. The Nubians were actually an empire prior to the Egyptian, or prior to Kemet being a civilization. Kemet is preserved as a beacon representing the continent of Africa, for the simple fact that Kemet worshipped multiple gods. Kemet was used as a reference point, a historical reference point to throw our people off and to continue worshiping and to continue doing pagan ritual and pagan custom. And that's the first reference. Okay, I have a tendency to get too far into it. The second reference that we also need to know is that we cannot, as Israelites in America, as Hebrew Israelites in America, we cannot discount or discredit Egypt. The reason being is because when you discount or discredit Egypt, you end up discounting and discrediting yourself. And when you discount or discredit yourself, you pretty much X yourself out of the picture, which is why we lost, which is why we stumbled at the debate. Egypt validates the existence of the Hebrew Israelites at that time, because without Egypt, the validation of, or the validation of the existence of Hebrew Israelite would be much harder to prove. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go back and start worshiping, or we need to go back and start adhering to Egyptian method. What I am saying is that we need to go back and start studying Nile Valley culture, because whether we like it or not, Hebrew Israelite came out of Nile Valley culture. Some call it the Hyksos people that came out of the Nubian Empire, and the bloodline of the Nubian Empire went up to the Lower Nile, which is actually north, to the Lower Nile civilization, and from the Lower Nile we settled into what was known as the Mesopotamian area. That could very well be true, but the mistake we make is that once we state that the Hyksos migrated up the Nile Valley, migrated up the Nile and resettled into a civilization in Mesopotamia, we tend to say that the Hyksos became the Sumerians. And while the Sumerians were a great civilization during the time of the Israelites were not the Sumerians. It is up to us to actually find out where we were during the time of the Sumerians, during the time of our cousins, Samaria. Because we could tell for a simple fact that we are not Sumerians because at the time of Yahshua, I'm going to get into that later on in the video. Yahshua is actually the Messiah of the Bible. But at the time of Yahshua, Yahshua went into a well. And it is written in the book of Yechaniah that a woman of Samaria came to the well. And she asked Yahshua a few questions, and Yahshua told her that he could not speak with her directly. He asked the woman, "Where's your husband?" And the woman denied having a husband, and Yahshua called her in a lie, saying, "Thou hast 7 husbands." So the woman was a whore, and the woman stated to Yahshua, "Why are you speaking to me?" Knowing that the Hebrews have no dealing with the Sumerians, and the Sumerians have no dealing with the Hebrews. So that specific reference tells us that the Israelites are not Sumerian. So we need to, the fact that came up in the debate and we try to validate ourselves as Sumerian was actually a pitfall. And so it's like a boxing match. When you get hit and it's a solid punch, that point is going to count. And if you get swung and they miss you with that punch, it's not going to count. So all historical references have to be solid punches. All historical references have to be have to match, for one, the Egyptian timeline. Not only the Egyptian timeline, and the reason I say the Egyptian timeline is because the Egyptian timeline is actually the reference point that we use to validate our existence in Egypt. If we cannot use the Egyptian timeline as a reference point, then, hold on a second. If we cannot use our Egyptian timeline as a reference point, then the timeline that comes prior to that, the Nubian timeline, will not be validated. So we need to understand the Egyptian timeline in order to understand the Nubian timeline. Once we understand the Nubian timeline, then we can understand the Mesopotamian timeline. So the one thing that we're missing in the intelligence community and in our study in the timeline. Now, in reference to the timeline, Hebrews do have a timeline, and our timeline is not referenced to the calendar that we use today, which came out of Rome. The calendar that we use today is based on the BC and the AD period. Okay, now the BC and the AD period is not historically accurate because when you look at the excuse me, y'all. The BC and the AD period is not historically accurate because when you look at the time of the Messiah, prior BC means before his birth, AD means after his death. When you look at his life, hold on a second. Pause.